Hey everybody, Kris here. This is the second in a series of 5 board meetings that Nate and I recorded back in 2018, and we've both referred to several times since. They're all based on a phrase we learned from Trevor Ragan of Learner Lab. Common sense isn't always common practice. And we came up with 5 areas of climbing where we see that phrase holding true, and we sat down and discussed them. And pretty much all of these themes came up in the writing of my new book, Adapt, Lessons Learned Climbing 100 513s, so it seemed like a perfect time to rewind to these episodes. In this one, we're discussing the pros and cons of building a grade pyramid versus building a grade tower or mesa, or as it gets very lovingly termed in here, a grade puddle. All right, let's get into it.
It's time to build.
All right, we just finished up some research.
Crunching a lot of numbers, which is hard for us. In preparation for this pyramids versus towers conversation. And we battled with the word towers quite a bit because it could just be one giant plateau, a mesa, so to speak. You know, it doesn't have to be a tower straight up and down. A great pancake, even.
The great pancake, yeah. Grade pancake or the great pancake?
Both sound great.
Yeah.
One sounds better.
Yeah, pancakes sound good too. We're going to have wings and pancakes later.
I'd support this.
Okay, so, building a pyramid, building a base, and, slowly adding up to a harder climb or going for the harder climb. Do you want to be a better climber? Do you want to climb a harder grade? Is it synonymous necessarily?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Do you think one is always better than the other, a pyramid or a tower?
I'm trying to think of a phrase other than it depends. There are times when one is better than the other. And even depending on what your time scale is of your pyramid, like a pancake could even be ideal at certain times.
I agree.
This is part of a series. We're doing the 5-day series of common sense versus common practice. So would you say that building a pyramid, when was the first time you were told you should build a pyramid if you want to get better?
Really early on. Actually, I think I probably read the concept first in Eric Hurst's Training for Climbing book. I don't know that anyone had ever called it a pyramid to me, though the concept existed in the gym. Like early on, there were a few guys who were my mentors in the gym. Chris Eklund, Josh Dees, several other guys who instilled the idea that if you want to climb this, 512, you should try to go do all the 511s first, in the gym.
Mm-hmm.
So they definitely built that idea into my head before I ever heard it called a pyramid, I think.
Word.
Early on, the Dark Ages.
Yes, the Dark Ages. And would you agree that it's, common sense practice? Like most people these days, I
agree it's common sense.
Or I guess I said common sense practice.
Yeah.
Is it? Yeah, words are hard.
You're trying to confuse me, Nathan.
Yes.
I agree that that's the common sense. I don't think it's necessarily the common practice. And I'm hesitating here because the common sense should be that it's a pyramid, which means it comes to a point.
Mm-hmm.
But even a lot of the people who believe in the pyramid idea never bring it to that point. So I don't know where I'm going with that, but it is common sense to do it. Yes.
Even the people that try to practice often fall short in one way or another.
Yeah, totally.
All right. Before we dig in a little further, we've been talking a bit about currency lately. So how current are your skills? how do you feel about how current your pyramid is? Like, and
That's
how relevant is that?
That's a good question. I know initially when I believe when I read it in Eric Hurst's book, he talked about a 12-month pyramid.
Which is great because 8A tracks that for you.
Yeah, exactly. So you should be looking in your last 12 months. And I think that's a really good way to start looking at it. I think as you get into the upper grades, you encounter some problems with that 12-month pyramid. Those problems could be you don't have the time to travel and you've done everything around the bottom of your pyramid, over the last decade. So it's tough to add to the bottom of your pyramid. Or you've kind of hit your ceiling, and if you want to do the next level, you have to spend all your energy all year on it, So you can definitely run into problems. And I feel like I start picking particular skills to be current with for my pyramid. So I don't necessarily need to do, if I want to do 14A, I don't need to do 8 13As or 16 13As or whatever the pyramid would tell me to do. I only need to do a couple of 13As of a similar style and build my little tower up to 14A, So it gets tricky, which is why we're having this conversation.
Yeah, and how much time do you have? If you only have, and we've talked about this just recently, if you only have, let's say, 20 days of climbing outside your entire fall.
Yeah, or some people only have that in their year.
Yeah. I sure as shit hope you aren't going to be like, well, I want to climb 12A, so let's start by climbing 124 10Bs and then totally start tapering down from there. Like, no, it's like, it is necessary to build some form of momentum, get that confidence going. Remember how to clip chains. Like, that's, as silly as that sounds, it's really important to know how to execute and how to send things. Like, you can forget how to send things. And it's kind of funny when it happens and you're like, oh, I'm just going to go out and go try the project today. It's like, are you going to send it? It's like, no. Well, what do you need to work? I'm working it. It's like, well, what are you doing? Like, you have planned to spin circles because you forgot how to pull the trigger.
Yep, totally. I kind of like the 4-2-1, the tiny little pyramid.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like the idea of that. And making whatever you've done in the last year that you've done 3 of, that's the goal of the base of your pyramid.
So let's say if last year I went out and I did 3 12Ds and 1 13A, then my goal next year is to make 12D the base of my pyramid.
Yeah. So add a 12D, do another 13A, and then try to add a 13B. And I think that's a good setup for like a weekend warrior, someone who doesn't get to travel extensively and climb all the time. If you've got a small time period throughout the year, if you only get out 20 days or 30 days in the year, then I think that's a decent way to approach it.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you've done 3 of, or you can build to 4 of in this calendar year, that should be the base of your pyramid for the next 12 months.
Word.
If your goal is to climb something hard.
Yes.
For you.
3 goals for a harder red point. So keeping with the topic of currency, when is it no longer current? When have all those things kind of dropped off?
For me, it was a while ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they can. I definitely think they can. And really, I think 12, 18 months might be a good number to start thinking about. You need to get a little more current with some specific skills if you haven't done those things and they are necessary for your project or for your goals. I think after 18 months, they really, really need to be updated.
Okay. So let's use an example. If I want to go do Beer Belly at the Red River Gorge, let's say I built myself a nice little tower last year. I've got plenty of days. I can go weekend warrior all spring, all fall, 3-day weekends, not a problem. And I don't even mind climbing when it's a little warm. And I've done a 13A, a 12D, and 2 12Cs in the last 12 months. Before that, I had maybe done a lot more 512s, but I really tapered to try and send that 513 last year. So how should I approach this season?
What did you say you were able to, how often are you able to climb? Are you weekend warrior or are you?
Weekend warrior, but all the way, like all weekends, I have no life responsibilities. Rock climbing is life when I'm not working.
Okay. How should you approach the season after you've already trained?
Already trained. Like, what kind of pyramid should I build? Basically saying, like, I have no currency when it comes to having done routes near my limit.
Right. I think you need to start back at the 12 C's, maybe even some B's when you first go out. Get some momentum, like we talked about before.
Yeah. When you touched on style, what would I be looking for?
I would look for steeper, a little thuggier. I personally like to do something early on that's off style of my major project. I don't think that's a necessity. So I would look for steeper, big moves, thuggier, slopier. I would, if Beer Belly was my real focus, I would avoid doing the 12 B's and C's that are vertical, crimpy. I would do a handful of C's or a handful of B's, then move up to C's and fill those out. Do at least 3 or 4 of those. And then I would move up to the D's and probably do a 13A before I got to Beer Belly. Because Beer Belly's a hard one, I think. I think it's an upper 13As. And I wouldn't go to the Madness Cave. I wouldn't do the long, super pumpy stuff the Red is known for. I would stick to the shorter, more bouldery climbing.
Cool. When we look at a pyramid, we can have issues on all sides as far as, it can be too tall, it can be too flat. You can even take pyramiding too seriously.
Yeah,
maybe try and build your base a little too low. Like we were joking around about earlier. If I want to climb 12A, I need to go do like 256 5.9s first.
Right.
And build up. But, time, energy, all that doesn't make sense. And at a certain point, if you're climbing things that are too far below you, are you really getting much value out of that?
Right, exactly.
So let's start by talking about that. Pancakes, grade pancakes or grade puddles, whatever we want to call them.
Grade puddle, that's a good one. I like that.
You're like, I'm going to build the greatest pyramid. I'm going to build this base as wide as possible. And then you forget that it goes up at some point.
Yeah. I think if you've done, let's even just say you're a person who loves doing a lot of routes at a grade or boulders at a grade. If you're that person and you've done 8 or 10 of a route, it's time to try something a little harder.
Like 8 or 10 in that year? Or in that?
Yes.
Okay.
In that 12 or 18 month period. If you've done 8 or 10 of those, it's time to try something harder. If you're a person who wants to do the bigger grade, which is totally okay. I have no problem with grade chasers if you do it smart. If you're that person, then I think once you've done 4 or 5 of those, it's high time to step up to the next grade. I don't think there's any excuse for a grade puddle bigger than about 10 routes.
Okay.
Unless you're just in an area where there's nothing else to do.
Okay.
If you're limited by geography, that's the only reason.
Cool. So let's talk a bit more on that, because I think that is something that there can be value out of the grade puddle.
Okay.
And I think geography is exactly the point. And the way I see it, like one of the best times where it can be advantageous to say, okay, I'm not going to build my pyramid up super tall. I'm just going to do all the lower levels is if you have the opportunity to travel a ton. Let's say,
yeah, for sure.
Let's say it's like, hey, I just finished grad school. I'm taking a year off. And then before I join the workforce and have to start adulting, I'm going to go everywhere I've ever wanted to be for 2 weeks at a time. So I'm going to go to Sierrana, Margalef, Oleana, Sayus, Verdon Gorge, all these places. At that point, especially if you've never gotten to travel and climb on different rock styles, it might be advantageous. And this is what I would recommend. Just climb a ton of stuff, maybe around your, 80, 85% level, like things that are still hard and they challenge you and you're going to have to try them, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 times, but you can do them fast enough that you can see a lot of these areas, learn a lot of new skills. And so, at the end of that year, you may have just the greatest grade lake you've ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that actually. I like that thought. That would never have occurred to me because I've never been in the situation where I could do that. I had my whole climbing career, I had 2-week vacations once a year. So it would never even have occurred to me to spend a year traveling to a bunch of different places. And you're right, that'd be a great time to build the Great Lake of Grades.
Yes.
So
so from there, if you looked at that year, you'd be like, oh, wow, like it would be easy to say I didn't do anything hard or I should have, focused. But if you can take those skills and then, once now that you have a 9 to 5 and you hopefully live near some climbing, you can start really sharpening off that base.
Yep. I think that's a really, really great point. Is there a time when it's okay to have the tower?
Yeah, there is. Okay is, yes, there is a time. So there's a time where I wouldn't say it's ideal, but it's best case scenario. And that's when, you live near a crag, it has 40 rock climbs and you've done 38 of them. Like,
yeah,
you know what? You've got your next 2 routes picked out.
Yep.
Like, and that's not ideal. Like, ideal is that you'd have more, but if that's what you got to work with, man, that's what you've got to work with.
Yeah. Do you feel like you should go back again on the idea of currency? Should you go back and repeat some things to get your levels current again?
I would rather keep things in as a circuit, rather than simply going back to repeat just for the sake of repeats.
Right.
So maybe it's you warm up, you try one of your projects twice, and then you've still got energy for more climbing and you just want to get fitter. So maybe go back and repeat like 2, 3, 4 hard routes that were difficult for you. And you can kind of keep those in rotation of like, keep rotating them through. So it's not that you just get them so dialed that it's like, oh, I can, do this 13B every single time. It doesn't feel hard. It's like, well, okay, if you've done it 100 times, it might not feel hard. So maybe sub it out for a 12B that's really difficult for you right now. So I think there's value in that. I haven't found a ton of value in just repeating for the sake of repeating.
Yeah.
But if I keep something in a circuit for building fitness, and especially if something represents a specific style. So for instance, if there's a vert line where I just have to really trust some bad feet, like every now and then coming back in and redoing it like that, then to me that's helpful.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. I think another time when all of these iterations are okay, including the tower, is if that's really what you want to do. Like, if you're stoked on it, do it. I don't have any problem with that. Like, if your whole goal is to only climb on Rochambeau, go climb on Rochambeau.
Have fun.
If you've never done the 10s on the 10 wall because all you want to do is Rochambeau, then whatever. Go do Rochambeau.
Man, and
I don't think it's going to make you a better rock climber. So if that's part of your goal, you're fucking up. But if the thing that makes you most happy is to climb on Rochambeau, be my guest.
Yeah. And I mean, man, God bless them. There are people who they would like nothing more than to spend 10 seasons on the same project.
Yeah.
Doing the same first two warm-ups.
Mm-hmm.
And they go straight to the project. They bolt to bolt and they just keep doing that until it's done. And, for them, that's happiness. I don't like that. I'm not into it. But, yeah, man, if that gets you psyched.
Yeah, and it's the same way with the pancake, I think, that if it happens in the red a lot, actually, because new crags are constantly opening up. There's constant new development. Let's just go do the other new 12As.
Yeah.
And then somehow you end up with people who've done 712As and never done 12C. It happens.
Totally.
And that's what makes them happy. So,
yeah. And and that's the huge thing. So earlier when I was contemplating on the tower on what is best case scenario and what is just makes it work, I liked your answer of best case scenario if it makes you happy. The other one where I say a tower is fine is if you feel like your athletic career is closing in on you, or if you just have whether that's age or whatever, or you have a big life responsibility coming up, maybe in 9 months you have a new member of your family coming in or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, hey, I have another 6 months before we're going to have a kid. And so I'm going to try and send my mega project because I know.
You act like as if having a kid stops your life or something.
I don't know. Don't frankly want to.
Not true, people.
But you know what I mean.
Yeah, totally.
It is going to be a change in your life. And so.
And most people are going to freak out about it.
Yeah. Especially if it's your first kid.
Yeah.
So, let's say you're like, hey, pyramid be damned. I want to go climb V11. I'm just going to go slam my head against this for the next X amount of months.
Yep.
And until it's done. Or, yeah, I know plenty of people who they're like, oh, well, I'm going to start a new position next year. And things, I'm going to have 3 to 5 years where it's just going to be super rough. So maybe that's a time when you say, I'm not going to worry about my base. I'm going to focus on this and I'd like to get it done.
Yeah. We've got lots of good examples of really great rock climbers with giant pyramids. Can you think of any great rock climbers who just have a tower or who have just a massive mesa?
The mesa. Good question. I'd say the closest thing, and this is almost blasphemy, if we were looking at currency, the closest thing to a tower and a great climber is probably Sharma.
Okay.
Massive base from being younger, having traveled, done everything. But more recently, let's say last 5-6 years or so, his volume is definitely not as high of new climbs. However, roughly 80% of the 515s, and this is off the website 99 Problems, I think is what it was called.
Mm-hmm.
Roughly 80% of the 515s he's climbed have been FAs.
Right.
And so with someone like that, when you're doing that much developing, you just can't climb as much volume. It's not possible. So there are, when we look more currently, and you see this with a lot of great boulders as well, when they first start, they do this tremendous amount of volume. Well, I'll mention Jimmy Webb's accomplishments later, but for him, between 2008 and 2014, which is a 7-year span, there was only 1 year that he didn't climb over 100 double-digit boulders.
Right.
And that's massive. But if you look at now, within the last few years, that's tapered off dramatically.
Sure.
But he's climbed a lot more. He's doing more developing. Also, he's just damn near climbed them all.
The first example that came to mind for me was Honnold.
Huh.
I should go. In fact, let's pause this. I'm gonna go look at his 8A.
Break.
Just see. How do you become the best climber you can be? You dream big. You plan your trip and pack your bag. You get on the climb. You try. You make mistakes. You adjust. You fall off and pull back on and fall off again. You care enough to ask why. You learn. You adapt over and over again. In my new book, Adapt, Lessons Learned Climbing 105.13s, I dig deep into not only the decisions made, hurdles confronted, and lessons learned, but also the life situations and experiences that led me there. I tell the story of how this big goal came to be and how I reached it on the morning of my 50th birthday. Whether you're a weekend warrior, like I was for most of my climbing career, or a full-time climber trying to push your limits over the long term, this book will help you learn the important lessons without making the same mistakes that I did. PowerCompanyClimbing.com/adapt, or the link is right there in your show notes. All right, we are back. And while I was over there searching on the computer on 8a.new, which, you know, you guys can disparage all you want, but frankly, it's a pretty good source of data to look at. It's kind of cool. I thought of an even better one than Honnold. But I did look at Honnold, and I think I was mostly right. In the last 12 months, he's kind of created a little mesa with 10 13Cs, 9 13Ds, 7 14As, and then only 1 14B. So he has added on to the top of that, but he's pretty consistent across 13C, 13D, 14A. And having had a long conversation with Alex about this, I suspect it's largely because he defaults to quantity. He defaults to doing more and has a tough time with going to max intensity. Like we talked about in the previous episode. However, if you look at his all-time, it's a little better. He's got 55 14As, 19 14Bs, only 3 14Cs. So again, when he gets near the top, he tends to fall off. He doesn't fill in those top couple levels of his pyramid. You know, it's like a mesa with a little boulder sitting on top. A person who I think is an even better example of having to build a tower of sorts is BJ Tilden. And it's because he's climbing in an area where he's done all of the hardest routes. You know, like you mentioned with Sharma, his hardest routes from now on are going to be FAs. Mm-hmm. It's not easy for him to travel because he's got a career, he's got a family, he's got a son now. So, and he's done all the hardest routes in his home area. So in the last 12 months, he's got 3 14As, 4 14Bs, 1 14C. So his is a wonky little tower.
Yeah.
You know, it does get better when you look at the all-time though. And BJ's somebody who keeps his skills current by having a circuit. You know, he's got quite a few 13 pluses, 14 minuses on lockdown that he can bring his skills up to current pretty quickly on. So his all-time shows 35 14As, 18 14Bs, 10 14Cs, 2 14Ds. So much more typical of the pyramid as we understand it. And I think your concept of currency is a really important one in that situation. BJ can build the tower because he can keep his skills current through his circuit.
Totally. So if we're looking at gold standards of pyramids, we've got a couple, and I'll go ahead and start with Jonathan Siegrist.
He just put his stuff on 8A not long ago.
Yeah, which I've already had discussions with multiple people who were just like, have you seen Siegrist's 8A? Shit is fucked up. Like, I counted the other day, I think in the last 3 years, he's done 62 514s second go.
Wow.
Second go ascents of 514 in the last 3 years, roughly 62. I think it was 3. Either 3 or 4 years.
He's really good at the second go send.
Yes. So one thing that I wanted to see, because I thought this would be interesting, he's a very prolific climber. He has climbed so many routes everywhere.
Yeah, and he gets them done fast.
Yes. I wanted to know how many 514s he did before he climbed 515.
Okay.
And this all was spurred on by, I was doing some research on a route for a guy I train. And interestingly, if you type in almost any 514 in the West, like just type out the name, Jonathan Siegrist's blog will come up in like the top 5 results. He has blogged about having sent almost every 514.
Yeah.
Which is, it's kind of neat. But so I type it in and it pulls up a blog from him. I was like, oh, I'll check that out. It's from 2010. So he's talking about trying this 14C, and he's just having a real hard time with it. Like it's starting to drive him crazy. And he was just like, man, this is it's really starting to get to me mentally. I'm starting to close in on a double-digit number of goes, and that's the most I've tried any 514 in over a year.
Right.
So he hit go number 7 and was just like starting to fray at the ends. And when I saw that, I was just like, holy shit, like that's insane. I mean, yeah, this is like a 14C that doesn't get repeated very often. And so then I was like, well, how many 514s did he do before he climbed 515? And did I already tell you? I did tell you this number.
Me this number, yeah.
He did 123 514s before climbing 515.
Right.
And a lot of them at that exact rate I was just describing in like 5 goes.
Yep.
Where 7 and 8 goes would be a siege effort, basically.
And some people would argue that's too many. Like you've spent way too long in that grade.
You could say that. And so I think you could even argue, and I kind of would, like, he said that, like, he was very open about he had plateaued for 4 years because he had climbed 9A and it took him 4 more years to climb 515. So he felt like he plateaued. But if you look at the volume that he was climbing, he got to the point to where he was doing 14C second go. Like he did several of those. And it's like, if you can do 14C second go, like, are you really plateauing? Even though like,
yeah. So maybe it's not plateauing as much as having trouble embracing the double-digit attempts on a route.
Yeah, and I think biography ended up taking him somewhere in the range of 50 goes.
Right.
So, I mean, honestly, you could argue that, and it'd be cool to get his opinion on this, but if he was doing all these hard rock climbs super quick in just a handful of goes, and then he went and actually put in a ton of time on biography, like, was he in a plateau during that time? Or was it he was building a necessary base or, you know, a massive base, and this was finally, you know, him utilizing that base?
Yep. No, I think that's a really good and valid argument. And while you were looking at Siegrist, I was looking at Ondra to see what his numbers looked like. His are similar in that same grade range. He took 106 514s prior to doing 515. So again, a pretty massive volume and doing them fast. In fact, he had already done Silbergeier by that time in a day. So he'd done a big wall 514 with multiple pitches of 514, you know. So he'd pushed the limits of staying in one grade range before he busted out as well. I also wanted to see with Ondra how many 515s he did before doing silence. And I was kind of surprised that he had done 49 of them. It hasn't even really registered with me that there are 49 515s out there. You know, I guess there's around double that number.
Something like that.
Around 100. But he did 49 515s prior to doing silence. Now, the thing that really floors me here, from the time of doing his first 15A, which was La Rambla, to the time he did silence, he didn't just add those 49 515s. He also added 442 new 514s.
Jesus.
So he's not messing around. He built a giant base under silence.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's 500 routes over 514 in those 8 years or whatever it was between 15A and silence.
Yeah, that's insane. So Siegrist's total 514 and up is 279 with 7 515s at this point.
Yeah.
So that's a wide base. And for a point of reference, I believe Margot Hayes did 19 or 20 514s before she did La Rambla.
Right.
It was right in that range. So roughly a fifth.
Do you think one approach is better than the other? And I guess this is an argument that could go on forever, which is the better of the two.
Mm-hmm. So I think currency has a lot to do with it. Margot, I believe, did most of those within like the 2 to 3 years prior to her doing La Rambla. Right. So it was very dense amount of time. I think she had 1 year where she did 14 14s in a year.
Okay.
I believe that happened, which is dense. That's a lot. It's one thing to do 25 14s over the course of a lifetime, and it's not another one to do them, in 2 school breaks.
Right. Totally. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I like this idea of currency and how it applies to having a pyramid or a tower or whatever. So yeah, I agree. And I don't know that necessarily one approach is better than the other. I think that, again, a lot of it comes down to what you're stoked on, Segrist was obviously stoked on climbing more 514s.
And has traveled a ton as well.
Yep. Yeah, so I think that has to be factored in as well.
Do you want to guess how many double-digit boulders Jimmy Webb has flashed?
Ooh, flashed. Jeez.
First try Friday.
Pete. I'm going to guess he's flashed 378.
That's a lot. It's 186.
Okay. I was way overestimating because I had high expectations.
Yes, because that's all you ever hear. He's done 1,021 double-digit boulders.
And Jimmy Webb's he's not been around as long as Fred Nicole.
No.
I mean, he's not a new kid on the block either, not by any means, but that's in a relatively short period of time.
Yeah, I think maybe 11, 12 years of climbing double-digit boulders.
So almost 100 a year.
Yeah, damn near.
Yeah. Diesel Pete. So, I think those guys make a great argument for the big pyramid. And then I think you can look at guys like BJ who are in a different situation that sort of make an argument for the tower. I sort of ran into that problem in the red right around the 13C level where I had done 3 13Cs and there were only 2 left in the red. There were 5 13Cs at the time. How do I progress to 13D when there are like 3 of those? You don't have all these routes to choose from. It's not the Franken Euro where there's thousands of routes 513 and harder.
Yeah.
There's an argument for the tower.
Do you feel like there's a time when circumstances be damned, you messed up with your pyramid or how you planned it, whether that's you got greedy or you overbuilt or...
Yeah, I think I did. And I can blame it all on something that's not me.
Perfect.
And I'm going to do that.
This is going to be an ivory tower.
So redriverclimbing.com has this. They have this competition that is points based, and you get a lot more points for doing 2 11As than you do for doing 1 12A. And I built a giant mesa over several years because I was so entrenched in that I need more points attitude. And it doesn't reward projecting at all because you're not putting fucking points on the board if you're projecting, and you can go out and climb all day long at the 510 level and pass up people who just did 514. It's a fact. I know because I did it. But it doesn't make you a better rock climber at a specific point. Like once you've done a certain volume of 511, 512, and you can do that volume all day long, it's no longer making you a better rock climber. And it took me a little while to realize that because I was really focused on the points, and I just need more points.
Yeah. Just because you're capable of doing 50 11As doesn't mean you can do 25 11Bs and 12 11Cs and keep going up like that.
Exactly. And there were actually times where I was projecting something and really stoked to want to climb that next higher grade, and I would look back at those rankings and be like, I'm fucking slipping in the rankings. I gotta go do some 511s. Let me check and see which 511s I haven't done, and I'm just gonna go knock them all out. And that's a dangerous place to be.
Yes.
So yeah, I think I did screw up for quite a long time by not projecting and just trying to do on-sites all the time for years.
Mm-hmm.
I got to a point where my hardest on-sites were for a while, my hardest on-site was my hardest red point. And then for quite a number of years...
Classic red flag.
Yeah. Quite a number of years, they were only one letter grade apart. And if you want to climb harder routes, if you want to become a better rock climber, and frankly, I think those two things do go hand in hand to some degree, then your on-site and your red point can't just be one letter grade apart. Because you're not pushing yourself hard enough at that point.
Totally.
So, yeah, I screwed up. How about you?
Oh yeah. I've spent a lot of time climbing with people who are much stronger than me.
Mm-hmm.
And while that's been beneficial in some ways, in other ways, it was really hard for me to appreciate where I was at, like currently, and say like, okay, like for me, V8 is really hard. This is like something that'll take me 2-3 days. Like I need to go around and I need to find the coolest V8s, the ones that inspire me. And I want to do all of those. When I travel, I want to look at the V8s.
Yep.
Instead, I was like, I want to climb, V10, the magic number here in the United States.
Yeah.
So I was always looking to those and like never appreciating. And so it was really easy for me to kind of build a tower doing that. And same thing with sport climbing. Like I would go through these phases. It would be, what would you even describe that? It was like a tower with a moat.
You're going to have to explain that to me.
Well, it's like... So I would build this base and it would be tremendous. The greatest base you've ever seen. And then I'd be like, cool, base is done. I've done great examples one season. I was like, I'm going to climb as many 13 A's and B's as possible. And it was going awesome. In like 2 weeks, I did like 10 of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, this is great. 514 right now. Like fully just jumped through all the plans. And what was funny is like, as I was going through these, I was like building this momentum, feeling more confident, and I was starting to do harder and harder of like within the 13A, B range. I was doing these routes faster and I was like feeling better about them. And it would have made so much more sense for me to be like, cool, I'm going to keep doing B's and then I'll just start trickling in some C's.
Mm-hmm.
And I keep doing that. And even had I never gone beyond that season, it would have been a great season. I'd have learned a lot. Instead, I was just an asshole, and I was like, "Nope, 514. Here I am," and I just got stomped.
Yeah, I think that's if you do just get stomped, then you should take a look at your approach and try to figure out what's wrong with it. After having the conversation I talked about earlier with Alex Honnold, his plan was to switch from an endurance athlete to an intensity athlete. That's how he put it. But he had a hard time taking his mindset from an endurance athlete into an intensity athlete. And he wanted to just jump up to the higher grade, like 14D. It's this grade I haven't done yet. I just want to do 14D.
Mm-hmm.
But working on 14Cs are pretty important to being able to do 14D if you just built a giant mesa at 13C.
Yeah.
So I do. If you get smacked down, I think that's a really good sign that you should reflect on your approach a little bit.
Totally.
Or give us a call and let us reflect for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's funny. I think I had even told you this. This was last year. I was just like, man, I don't understand why bouldering to me makes so much more sense and it's so much easier than sport climbing. Like, to me, I was just like, I just take more naturally to it or something. So I started thinking about it more and more, and I looked, and I realized I've done more double-digit boulders than 513 rock climbs. That's not a good thing. Like, that is...
Well, I mean, it is if you're a boulderer.
As someone who's spent more years sport climbing than bouldering, that's terrible.
Yeah.
But it's just a matter of, I haven't taken the time to build a base.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a huge goal of mine for this year. Boom, goal.
All right, goal. I'm going to edit that into our goals episode from a while ago.
Please do. So that's one of my goals this year, is to really take the time and build a pyramid with sport climbing. I'm not bouldering much these days, so it's harder to do it with that. So I do just spend my time, like, for instance, this year in Waco, I've got about a month in Waco total. And so I climbed a handful of boulders to kind of get back in the swing of things. And then I was like, cool, like, I have the strength, I have the currency, like, I feel comfortable here. Time to just like build my Waco tower.
Yep. No, I think that's a good approach in a lot of cases. Like I talked about BJ, our friend Lee Smith is in a similar situation where he's climbed in the red for a long time. He's got a family, he's got a career. He doesn't get to travel and climb much. His wife doesn't climb often. And so he has to build somewhat of a tower. It's tough to go back and continue building a pyramid. I would, however, suggest in those situations, and this is something BJ is good at, getting out to other areas, really making an effort to get to another area that's different and build some new skills there, and really try to add a little bit to your pyramid.
Totally.
I think that's really important.
Yeah. Building a base, even if you climb on limestone, if you can, build a base with a lot of like granite sport climbing or things like that, like, that's going to add a lot more than doing more of what you've already done.
Yep. And you're becoming, if you stick to one type of rock, one style of climbing all the time, you become this specialist. That's what a tower is, essentially. You're specializing in something.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Not necessarily a problem. But there's another way as well. And that's what our next episode is going to be. We will indeed be back a week from today with the third episode in this series, looking at generalization versus specialization. Until then, if you're interested in checking out the new book, you can find it at powercompanyclimbing.com/adapt, or the link is right there in your show notes. You'll also find links to both Nate and I on YouTube and a link to our newsletter, The Current, where every month we try to connect the dots between all of the concepts we're currently working with and help you learn, grow, and excel.
This time, power. This time to build 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 power. This time to build.